wanted to record a little bit of the sun blasting through the tent here in the morning. Stayed in bed a little longer. It's almost 7 o'clock. Yeah, it's slept pretty good. There's a good breeze all night. A lot of red squirrels fighting. They're still fighting out there. I don't know what they're doing. Pretty good night. Rained a few drips, but not bad. And the tent is not very wet this morning, so the dew point must be such that it doesn't do that. And I can definitely hear the wind. Oh, time to get up and make some breakfast. Pretty hard to beat. Some oatmeal and some hot citrus drink. I didn't bring any Russian tea this time, but a little bit of a breeze coming off the lake. This haze is breaking up. The camera to expose correctly. There, yeah, it's kind of some lumpy, hazy clouds. There's a little chance of some rain here and there today. Keep the rain gear closer. The only difficulty I'll have is if I go on to Alice, I gotta go that way, right through there. Right more or less into the wind, but we'll see. But yeah, I got a really nice little spot right here. Sit and make breakfast and get my gear out. Really pretty little campsite. Tent is drying perfectly in the breeze. In this nice little sunny spot. The strategy is, I stayed on this site right here on Thomas last night. The strategy here is I'm going to cruise across here into the wind, take this portage down to Kakabik, a little 10-rod portage down through this lake and into Alice with the wind to my back. Then I should be able to, the wind should be coming from this direction. I should be able to cruise this shoreline and go over here. Maybe if it's nice and whatever, I might get a campsite over here. Maybe this one might work good too. We'll see if anybody's around. This tends to be busy. And then I either need to take the Squishwee River or up through the lakes to Carroll, and either way back to Insula. So that's my plan for today. The weather is pretty nice again. Unbelievable. Never had a trip like this ever. A little breezy, but you know, it looks great right here, but the wind's coming from that direction blowing this way. It's gonna be windier out there once I get beyond this point right here. change of plan. I tried getting up to the portage to Alice, but these waves are just crazy out here. I'm going with the wind now. I turn around. It's pretty bad. Out there trying to cross Thomas was about impossible. So I made it about 3/4 of the way. Then I had around that last point and I didn't know for sure if I would make it. So I chickened out, playing it safe. I decided to just turn around and go back to Kiana. Say going with the wind. Kiana, then down to Insula should all be wind to my back. I can manage this direction, but the waves are pretty tall. They were as tall as the boat. So over there, I got a little water in, not bad. But and I can't imagine what it would be like out on Alice Day. So I guess I'll consider myself unlucky that I just didn't make it, but that's okay. Go back to Insula and then try to figure out how to get out of the wind. The wind is supposed to be this strong pretty much the rest of the week, although it's going to be changing. This is from the northeast, going to be changing to the southeast, and then later, next day changing to the south and stay to the south. Maybe get a little stronger on Friday as a storm comes in. 70% chance of rain and stuff, so there's a storm coming. And then, who knows, Saturday might be a little calmer. We'll see how that goes. We'll keep steering here. Yeah, looking at it from this way, it just seems so perfectly calm, but through that little channel right over there is main part of Thomas, and yeah, it was pretty windy. Go back this way and try to stay out of the wind. I'll probably look a little rough, sorry, but I'm gonna just make this portage. It's actually pretty steep. I don't know if the camera's doing it any justice, probably not, but I'm double packing it again. This is a 25 rod, so it isn't like it's too far. I took a canoe the first trip because there's nowhere to set the canoe down in this mess on the way up here, just all boulders. Now there's a nice spot, but once I have the canoe on, just something, especially when it's this short, I just keep going. But as you can see here, maybe you can't see, it's all up here. Never looks the same on camera, I know. Someone's done a nice job of making steps though. But it's all up this way. And then it turned into a nice little sidewalk. Look at that. Isn't that cool? Some examples of those Norway pines we were looking at from a distance. Pretty nice trees. Even a little regrowth here in one of them. Always good to see that. Very easy portage overall. Steep at the ends, but nice landings at both ends. Pretty awesome. I love little things like this, where a red squirrel sat and ate a pine cone. Probably a balsam fir cone or a jack pine cone. Took it all apart and sat right there. Chowed it down. Yeah. to Kiana Lake. That was just my paddle. I'm just ruddering down the narrows here at the end of Kiana Lake, almost to Insula. Yeah, right at the pinch there in the middle of Kiana, I ran into a couple I had seen on the portage between Hudson and Insula, and they were retired. They said they kind of have been canoe camping a lot of places, especially like Quetico. Don and Nancy, and very nice people. Talked about gear and talked about the trips they've been on and that sort of thing. Yeah, very, very nice people. So they were on Insula the last couple of nights. Now they're headed up to Thomas area. Want to spend a couple of nights up there. They got 11 days, so they've got plenty of time, they said. So it's pretty much what they do in their retirement, although they spent a lot of it, I guess, a lot of time in Quetico. Funny how much windier it seems when you look back toward the direction of the wind versus when you just were floating with it on the way down. Not sure if you can hear me through the wind noise, but yeah, crazy. Blowing through here pretty good too. Here's a campsite on the north end of Insula. Looks pretty peaceful out there, doesn't it? I tell you, it was a windy ride back here, fortunately with the wind. You can hear it in the trees, but it sure doesn't look like it here. I'm on the lee side of the campsite. Oh, the landing, the canoe is difficult. It's down there. I want to stop and check this out. This was the site that people talk about being so nice, and talking to that Don and Nancy from Duluth there, they're telling me they stopped here because this was their favorite site, and they've been traveling everywhere in the Boundary Waters in Quetico for years and years. But there was some tree damage, so I'm gonna come up here and check it out. And there is some of it. This big Norway's blew down, big root ball standing up. Wow. One snapped off right there near the campsite, or near the fire grate, I mean. Oh geez. There's a widowmaker. Wow. These sites tend to be difficult to find a spot to put your tent because of all the roots on the bare rocks. Oh my. Geez, that did make a mess. Holy cow. Look at that. What's left now is just absolute bare rock. They said where the good tent pads were, where the trees fell. You can see one kind of underneath this log. It's a good pad, tent pad. Oh, there's one up here too. Wow, this is pretty nice. I just love the view in places like this. Well, sit down, I'm going to eat something regardless and then decide if I want to stop now or get further along Insula while the wind is favorable. Well, I did decide to stay here at this site in Insula after all. It's later this evening, it's already 6 o'clock. I've been busy getting camp set up, working on, made myself some good food. Actually, I had pancakes and bacon. That's one of my breakfast meals, I know, but I just really sounded good at the time, and often in the mornings I don't get around to making that because if I want to get moving. Been wonderful. The sun is setting here on the lake. Finally get a minute to set down. The site is pretty incredible. Yeah, I gave you a little tour before. Yeah, all filled up. Just sent a message home on the inReach, and just kicking back in my chair and resting a little bit. I'm gonna, no, there's my inReach right there actually. I'm going to start thinking about a meal here later. I think it's going to be cheeseburger. I think it's called bacon cheeseburger macaroni, something like that. But had that before, it was really good. But I think I'll just I'll come back in a little bit and I'll show you a little project I was working on. This is that big blowdown that's in the back of the campsite. It's amazing the amount of granite that exposed. So speaking of exposed granite, I'll show you something kind of interesting. Here is granite that's been weathered and not covered by trees. The texture of it, it's got texture. Feels kind of gritty. There's some sparkly stuff in there. I don't know, it's silica or what it is, but here where the tree roots have covered it up for centuries, I suppose, it is completely different. It is a very porous, it looks like concrete actually, kind of pretty new concrete that's been kind of very roughly brushed or something like that. It's just amazing. And see my shadow there. It's just incredible how tall that is. Yep. This granite was just too, I guess didn't have enough cracks in it for the roots to attach themselves to. So tent pads here are very difficult to find. In fact, that couple I talked to said, you know, the best tent pad, there used to be one good one right where those trees were in front of them, and the other one was right here, and unfortunately this tree fell on them too. I assume the Forest Service cut it down, and the tree, you know, fell, or it was leaning this way, and they cut it off. And I can tell it's the Forest Service because their standard practice, at least I assume it's them, could be somebody else, but is to take an axe and they remove the bark, and then they cut through with a two-man crosscut saw. And they do that because the two-man crosscut saw is not really a very hard tooth, and the dirt that grows that's in the bark will dull the saw very fast. So that's the way the old timers did it. I think that's the way they still teach them in the Forest Service. So anyway, when they cut this log off, this log used to be right here, more on that in a second. This was leaning like those were. And when they cut this log off right here, this root ball fell back down. I've seen this before in, logging in the woods. So this thunk fell back down. You can kind of tell it's completely tore out of the ground. This one, it's pretty tall, but I think if these were all cut off, this might fall back down. But that would be a very dangerous operation. If you had a chainsaw, it wouldn't be too bad. But so anyway, this log used to lay across here, and I got ambitious and decided to cut it off. Pretty good size. Hand spread across it. Oh, I don't know, it's a foot, I suppose, at this point. Nice Norway pine. Unbelievable how old this tree is. Look at the growth. I don't know if this shows up, growth rings show up in here, but an inch roughly like that is somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 rings just for an inch. Think about that, how long a tree's been there. And I did it with this, my little Irwin saw that's a 800, I think it's called. It's a hardened tooth, cuts both directions. They're normally 20 inches long. I've shortened this one down. You can take a grinder and carefully grind and cut, put a kind of a curve in that, and shorten the saw because it used to be about this long. I just wanted it smaller, and so I got it down to that 9.5 ounce range, something like that. And then piece of PEX tubing with a slit cut in it. It's got a slit all the way down, and that slides over the saw. And then once that's on there, this thing slides over the PEX tubing, and it's got a buckle that buckles around from one side to the other and holds that plastic thing on, and that adds another 2 ounces roughly, almost. But so I cut off 3 little rollers. My plan was, since there's nowhere to go, it's uphill this way. This is where the tent pad would be. Really the only logical place to take it is that way. And so, like the Egyptians, take some little smooth balsam fir here. In fact, it was this one that was blowing down here in the pile. And plan is roll it on there and roll it down this way. I might not get to it. It's a lot of work for me to roll it over without any tools, so I might just leave it there as inspiration for the next person to do it. Maybe they can roll it down the hill and put it by the fire grate. I'm going to cook that bacon cheeseburger, hamburger helper stuff I was talking about. Just thought I'd go over that really quick. Prepackage this thing. Let's just cut the label off the box of hamburger helper. In this bag is the noodles and the sauce that comes with it. This is half a batch, so I think there's about 1/4 pound of ground beef in there that's dehydrated. And the secret ingredient is a couple of ketchup packages. And this is all prepackaged in a nice little thing, and they fit nicely in my barrel. Next, I'll put the ground beef in the pot. This is an aluminum pot, Trangia. And what I'll do is I'll just put in some water. You can do this ahead of time if you want, but in this particular case, I'm just going to put it in there. It'll set a few minutes while I get the stove ready, and then I'll actually, when I get it to boil, and if I put all the other ingredients in, it'll have to sit for a while anyway. It'll be plenty rehydrated. Now, while that's doing that, I'll get the stove ready. Solo stove that I'm using as my pot stand, and I can also use it, cook everything on sticks if I like, but in this particular case, I'm going to use alcohol. I have a little homemade windscreen, which is just a really, really light gauge aluminum, crimped on the end, so I can slide the two pieces together and uncrimp it, and it fits down inside here when I'm not using it. So I just hook them together, and it works good. And then this is the, of course, pot stand that comes with the Solo stove, and then this would go over top like that. For a stove, I'm using a little homemade alcohol stove. You saw this before maybe. This is just a, what I call a low power one. It's called a bamboo stove is the design it's based on. Then I just made a little a wick out of aluminum off of the diameter of a pop can. Just crimp it every so often and just roll a stack of it up, and it just sets inside there, just sitting in there. And all those little capillary walls of that aluminum will wick the alcohol up, and it'll burn a nice little flame. And I mean, this one I've tested, 1 ounce of alcohol will burn a half an hour or slightly over. It burns a long time. So this will boil pretty fast, start boiling pretty fast, but in this case I need to boil it for a little while, not super long time. Somewhere about a half to 3/4 of an ounce of alcohol will do just fine in this stove, or for this meal, I mean. And pour that in there. And then this is the cap off the original bottle. I'll just kind of set that on there to keep evaporation from happening until I get it lit. Oh, and the alcohol I'm using is actually denatured alcohol, but I keep it in these nice yellow heat bottles. The yellow heat also works really well. So this one's got a screw-on cap. Holds 12 ounces. That's enough for a dozen meals or more. It really works great. I use denatured alcohol because I can buy it by the gallon, and it burns just pretty much the same as the yellow heat. Don't use the red stuff. It's soot. It creates soot. It's smoky. It's just not the same stuff. Yellow bottle if you're going to use heat. I put the stove down on the ground for safety. That log's a little tippy, and the fire grate in this campsite is really nasty. It looks like somebody fried fish right on top of it or something. I just don't want to really put my stuff on it. Anyway, so what I do now that the cap is off, I have alcohol exposed in there. Now how do I get down there and light it? Well, I got a little trick for that. All I do is find any old stick laying around. There's usually tons. I just dunk the stick in the alcohol, take it out, light the stick, and light the stove. I would have showed you that part, but I had my hands kind of full holding the camera. Anyway, there it's burning. Normally I wouldn't even let it, I'd right away put the pot on it. Just hear it spitting and sputtering a little bit. That's the capillary walls in that little tube in there sucking up the alcohol. That'll smooth out once it gets going. And then I just put the pot right on it, and it's going to start cooking. You can see if I can get down here, there's just a little bit of a gap there between that windscreen and the pot. Just enough. You do need a little bit of gap. And that's just about to start to boil, so I'm going to stir in the, I'm trying to be kind of careful, I'm doing this one-handed, but we're going to stir in the noodles and the sauce. Once it's all going, then you stick it in this pot cozy for 20 minutes or so, and take off the lid, and everything will be perfectly cooked. There, in about 20 minutes after sitting in pot cozy, it's all perfectly cooked. Now I'm going to sit right here on this rock and finish watching the sunset. I don't normally ever get weather like this, just so you know. It's actually one of the first times I've ever had perfect weather for a couple days straight here. Pretty incredible. Oh yeah, the secret ingredient. Like I said, the ketchup packet. Just squeeze that right on there. In fact, I'm going to put 2, and it'll taste just like a bacon cheeseburger, I promise.